Hey everyone, welcome back. Just before the video starts, letting you know that this video will have a bit of a poor quality in terms of video and audio, and that's because my camera just broke up as I was recording, so I have to record with the old one, but hopefully by next week everything will be solved. So sorry for that, but I hope you enjoy this book review. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Andre and I'm your bookworm for this channel. And today we have another book review and we're diving into Wheel of Time again with The Path of Daggers. Of course, before we jump into all that, if you're new, don't forget, subscribe, like the content, and comment away which one of your Wheel of Time books is your favorite. And let's see if we match. I'm gonna give my answer at the end, but let's see. So, Wheel of Time, Path of Daggers. This is the 8th book of a 14-book series, 15 if you count with the prequel. And so this marks the second half of it, and this series is characteristic for its epic fantasy and for its dualism between male and female, powers, cultures, peoples, everything. And you've probably heard about it because it's always on lists of top fantasy series or even just top general series in the world. But this is the 8th book. For our usual bookworms, you've already seen the reviews for the previous books, but if you're new, I have reviewed every single book so far of this series. You can go and jump to the first one over here, which is The Eye of the World, and then just follow the progression until you get to this one. As for The Path of Daggers, this book was published in 1998, and so far it has gathered over 146,000 ratings on Goodreads, and it gets an average score of 3.93, which it isn't that good considering Goodreads terms. And so far in the series, this is the book with the lowest score. And for the ones that don't know, this book is also one of the ones where we are fully into the slog, which is a portion in this series that the fans like to call it. And it's where the pacing and the plot kind of become a bit meandering before they reach the final climax with the final books. So it is expected that the score would decrease, but it is quite a decrease, going from 4 point something to 3.93. Does my opinion match what Goodreads thinks? Let's find out. But first, of course, we're gonna go through our dear synopsis. So you know the drill. If you don't want to hear anything about the synopsis, especially because this is the 8th book, there's gonna be spoilers, and you don't want to hear anything about it, just skip to the timestamp floating around and you'll jump right into the review. Otherwise, stick around and I'll just read you the synopsis and you'll get to know whereabouts in the story we're at. Randall Thor, the Dragon Reborn, has conquered the city of Ilion, struck down Samael the Forsaken, and shattered the armies of the invading Shamchan. Nynaeve, Avienda, and Elaine have broken the Dark One's hold on the world's weather and are poised to retake the throne of Endor. And Egwene Alves, leader of the exiled ice, marches her army towards the White Tower. But Rand and the Ashaman that follow him are slowly being corrupted by the madness that comes to the male wielders of the One Power. If they cannot remove the Dark One's taint from the true source, then none will survive to fight the last battle against the Shadow. And as Rand struggles to maintain his sanity, the Shamchan launch their counter-strike. Okay, now that we're back, let's just go through the few scores that we have. Few because there's a lot of them at the moment, as you can see by this table. But the 7 books that we've rated so far range from 3.8 to 5, which is quite the range. But of course, the majority of the books are within the 4 or 4.4 range. Those are the average, and then there are some extremes like book 6 that get a 5 out of 5, and then book 7 they get a 3.8. And I understand that maybe book 7 was a bit influenced by the fact that book 6 was so good, but that's why we have these reviews, to keep on reading and to comment away what we think, and if we think that actually, if I had read that book isolated, not one after the other, maybe that score would be different, but who knows. What matters is, let's find out what the score for the 8th book is. Starting with plot, like I said, we're truly into the slog portion of Wheel of Time. And funny enough, even though I think the plot had some issues, I actually didn't think that those issues were that bad compared to what is yet to come and compared to what has happened. There were still some chapters that felt a bit useless to me in the sense that we had the characters talking, but the plot wasn't really moving forwards. We were just getting character development, which is important in itself, but I felt like sometimes we wouldn't get even that much. from a chapter. What was important was that at the same time, while we had these chapters that didn't give us much, we would have chapters with momentous character moments that would be trivial for the future of the plot. And I acknowledge that I only know that because I've read this series already, so I know that these moments will be pivotal, but they are also really cool moments to read, and they're epic in its sense. But yeah, I understand that for a first reader, this book would seem quite boring because they wouldn't know how impactful those character moments will be further on. I think that still, the plot has enough twists and novelties that I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. And especially with this book, because we explore so many different places at the same time, it allows us to see the plot in a more worldwide view and see all the pieces that are moving together. And this leads me to the character category, because in this book we have a whole lot of POVs that we keep changing between. And not only with the protagonists, but also with secondary characters, which turned out to be very valuable. And I think this is because of 2 reasons. One of them, it brings novelty. We're getting this novel feeling of it's not always the same characters, this is someone new. Which side is this person on? What are they doing? All those questions arise. But also, like I said, it allows us to view other parts of the world and see how those parts are moving in accordance to the rest of the plot and the rest of the world. Of course, the majority of the book is still spent with our protagonists, don't worry, and it wouldn't be possible if that didn't happen for us to have those big momentous moments of the characters that I mentioned in the plot category. And let me tell you, some of those moments were really mind-blowing and tragic and caused a whole range of emotions in me, from sadness to happiness to astoundment. I was like, and I think that wouldn't be possible if these characters weren't so well written. I think they are so deep, they have so many facets, they feel like really true people that I have connected with, that I'm now traveling this world and this story with them. So I think this book has a great work on character, and that's why I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5. World building is our next category, and I think this book was able to maintain world building in its standard, which is a good standard. There are aspects built into the world building in accordance to what we knew so far, so it's just adding more things on top, but without adding too much complexity. It's just playing slightly differently with what we know. It goes back to that aspect of, now that we know how this works, we can play around and maybe change one thing and see how this thing affects the whole scenario. The only thing I have to point out is that because this book felt very character focused, in the sense of the characters were growing inwards in like their own self and not much interacting with other characters, and the relationships with the other characters were growing, I felt like the culture that is so big in Wheel of Time lost a bit its focus and went a bit on the background. Not that much, there were still things happening that were fun to see and interesting, but it wasn't as prominent as it usually is. So for this category, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. Writing style, which is our next category, has the same caveat as usual. If you like descriptions of dresses, of landscapes, of how women move across the corridor, then you're going to love this prose. Otherwise, you might have some difficulties. I do enjoy this type of writing, the prose. However, I have to say the pacing was a bit iffy for me. There were some parts that dragged for way too long, like I mentioned before, and then suddenly there were parts, and a battle in specific, I'm not gonna say which one, just know that there was a battle, and that battle felt a bit confusing because time was moving quite fast in that battle, so we were jumping big portions of time, but there wasn't exactly a focus on what was happening with the characters. It felt a bit confusing, a bit mysterious, and I don't know if it was written like that, supposed to be like that, or if the author just didn't have a good grasp on how to write that specific battle. In the end, the aftermath was still amazing and epic, and it allowed the characters involved to have big moments like I mentioned. So there's still a good thing out of it. It just felt for me a bit confusing for a battle that seemed to be quite important. I think a better way to describe it is the battle wasn't so much focused on the action, but on the characters and what was happening to the characters in the sense of their psyche, what was happening to them as this was going on. So yeah, for me, the main issue with this category was the irregular pacing, but overall I still think it's quite good. But then again, if you're not that keen with descriptive prose, together with this being a first read and being part of the slog, you might not think this category is that good, might give it a 2 maybe, but just think that if you push through, it will get better. But for me, this category is actually a 4 out of 5 because I quite enjoyed the writing as usual, and the pacing was just okay. I think this 4 is a 4 that is getting very close to a 3 though. And the last category is enjoyment as usual, and of course, I already said it, this is a reread for me. I really enjoy Wheel of Time, it's my favorite fantasy series, so reading the series automatically brings me a lot of enjoyment and I'm always keen to read it. But reading this specific book again and knowing the moments that were gonna happen, I was very excited to read it. But I do acknowledge that for a first time reader, this book would have been hard to get through. And the big moments for them maybe wouldn't that big. Maybe they were just like, oh, this is kind of bad or this is kind of good, but okay, it's just this moment across the whole book. But for me, I actually enjoyed it. I was keen to see what was going to happen, especially getting the details again, because of course things start fading out, but I really enjoyed it. And the fact that it's also one of the shortest books helps. And I mean, it's a short book that is quite subjective because this book is still quite big, but it's one of the shortest in the whole series. So was able to read it quite fast, and that helped with not feeling like it was dragging forever. But also, I guess that if you're reading one after the other, you might find that this. So for the enjoyment category, I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. And so we reached the end of our review. Just as a refresher, I'm gonna add the score to that table of scores, and we have 4 for plot, 5 for characters, and then 4 for world building, writing style, and enjoyment. This gives us a final score of 4.2 out of 5. So as you can see, again a bit biased towards the upper levels of Wheel of Time because Goodreads got a 3.93. This one is a 4.2 for me. But then again, if you like epic fantasy, I reckon you'd like this book a bit more than the average. And like I said, keep pushing through. This might be one of the slowest, but epic things are about to come, especially in the next books. There are big moments in every single book, and you just have to keep reading, believe me. And it's funny because this means that A Crown of Swords, the 7th book in the series, is still the lowest book for me. And this one is actually equivalent to some of the earliest books, which I kind of understand because there are big moments where in the previous one I didn't think there were really that much happening, both in plot or characters. But yeah, I feel like from now onwards we'll get good results from Wheel of Time again. But I can also guess that for a first time reader, the score would probably be lower for this specific book, and maybe it would match the Goodreads score a bit more. But for me to know that, I have to ask you, what do you think about this book? Have you read it? If so, comment away what your score was. And if you haven't read it, go read it, but first read the other 7, of course, and then come back and comment away. What do you think of this score and of this book? Is this book one of your favorites? It is not. My favorite so far is probably book 4 or book 6. It's very, very tight between these two, but my favorite is yet to come. So stick around, subscribe, don't forget that, like the content, and I'll be seeing you soon on Sundays and Thursdays, okay? This.